Good afternoon. I would first like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my project. My name is Olga Reinauer. My educational background is chemistry and material science. And in my free time, as a personal hobby project, I am developing a game for undergraduate chemistry students. And today I will present my motivation, what issues I'm trying to solve, and most important, the game development process. When I was studying, I always wondered why so many people around me dislike chemistry and find it too complex. And while looking at the literature, I found out that there is, in fact, a complexity specific to chemistry. It is very difficult to link the properties of compounds around us and their structure. To give you an example, to explain the properties of ice, one has to start with the atomic properties of hydrogen and oxygen, what type of bond they form within a molecule, and then how water molecules interact between each other to finally come to the properties of the compound. For instance, Professor Johnston proved that making this structure property link demands an unreasonable cognitive effort from students. However, this is the core of chemistry and this link has to be understood. That's why I wanted to develop a game that helps students make this link, because the majority of existing chemistry games, they're targeting a specific issue. For example, balancing equations or calculating solubilities, but I wanted to make a game which connects structure and properties. In order to help students build this link, researchers in chemistry education suggest structuring the course around certain topics and connect them in a certain way. For example, in the curriculum developed by Cooper and Klimkowski, researchers suggest connecting atomic properties to the energies of forming and breaking bonds inside the molecules, and then the forces of interactions between the molecules, which are finally linked to properties of compounds such as melting points, solubilities, conductivities, and so on. So I wanted to create a similar connection. And here on this slide, I'm presenting the learning material which is integrated in the game. I want to show how atomic properties affect the type of bond they form. And then I wanted to connect this to interactions between molecules and finally link it to the properties. And to do that, I used a number of different game mechanics. I will explain it later to you in more detail, but just to give you an overview, I have atoms represented as a collection of characters. And the player has to merge them to craft compounds which finally will be played as towers against enemies. I will now explain it all in detail. I will start with the collection game mechanic. I was observing my kids playing Pokemon cards, and I've noticed that after some time playing, they could remember by heart all of the properties, the evolutions, the points, the life points, and so on. So I wanted to reproduce the same effect. So atoms in my game are presented as characters. What is important is that they have a distinct visual style depending on the type. We have metals, halogens, and so on. And they represent orbitals in a symbolic way. And what is good that they have distinct properties which could be guessed from their position on the periodic table, which is always visible to the player. Then I thought how one would connect these atoms together to form compounds. This is the most complex part of the game, which took me the longest to design. So I used here merge mechanics. Merge game mechanics basically consists in building more complex objects from the building blocks in a limited space. I have here, you can see I have a crafting arena where atoms are appearing, which has a limited size, and the player has to merge the atoms together. when he does that, he has a second screen which appears, and on this screen we see a formula of the compound these atoms form. And then the player has to select the correct type of intramolecular bonds and intermolecular bonds. And the player here has all the information necessary. For example, from the position of the atoms on the periodic table, he could estimate the electronegativities, and then he could estimate which bond type these atoms form. And already there, the player starts having an idea about the properties of the compound. For example, metallic compounds would rather have good conductivities, ionic compounds would rather have high melting points, and so on. And then player selects the connections between the molecules, and we have, they are ranked from increasing to decreasing strength. And while repeatedly performing this action, the player already starts having an idea about the properties of the finally formed compound. Compounds here are also have distinct symbols. For example, metals have a metal sphere, liquids have a shape of a flask, and salts have a shape of the gem. And these compounds are used as towers in a game, which means that they will be fighting against enemies. And here I have the type of enemies, they are solvents. So to withstand the attack of solvents, one has to select the compounds which are insoluble. We have heat waves, so one has to select compounds with high melting points. And we also have a notion of conductors, semiconductors, and insulators to fight against electric current. Now, to bring it all together, I'll give you an example of a typical gameplay. We have an enemy which starts moving on the battlefield. It is a heat wave with a temperature of 600 degrees. So the player has to evaluate if compounds present on the map have the melting points above or below this value. If no such compounds are present, the player has to build them from atoms. And my idea is that by repeatedly selecting compounds with the correct properties, by repeatedly selecting bonds, the player integrates the learning material. So currently, the game is in the final stages of development. It can already be played with 200 compounds built from approximately 20 atoms. They are only simple compounds, pure or binary, which cover most of the necessary theory. What I expect is that students would be better able to predict or compare the properties of compounds based on the formula. And this could be tested with standard assessment, written or oral. Of course, this game cannot replace a traditional course. It is intended to be used as a complement because it has no quantitative methods. There are no calculations, no balancing equations, but it is intended to show in what context these quantitative methods are used. And my current needs are mainly the feedback and advice. I'm looking for advice from professionals in serious games and from professional educators, because up until now I did all by myself. So if you have any advice or tips how could improve this game, I'm looking forward to it. And eventually I would like to test this game as well with students. And I have a demo on my phone if you are interested to see it. So if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, that's really great work, and I haven't thought that we could make chemistry as a game. It's been always a nightmare for me. So, Yassine, I probably have a question.
In fact, if it's not a question, but it's a comment. You said you need help. I think we are learning about you because it's fantastic. Really, the idea is innovative. How to make chemistry as live and attractive. It's a nice paper. I enjoy reading the paper and learning it. So it was just a comment. I'm a fan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yassine.
Yeah, I like the project. I'd like to play it. I was wondering, so if I understand correctly, you're sort of an autodidact in terms of game design. Is that right? You're just learning on the fly game design.
I did everything myself. Yeah.
Okay. Did you look at certain types of popular puzzle type games, and were you inspired by, I don't know, Threes, Candy Crush, all these sort of?
Yes.
What games were you looking at?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I was inspired by several games, particularly Plants vs. Zombies. It's a casual game, it's a casual tower defense game where all the characters attack specific types of enemies. And also I selected this casual design because I looked at the people who play such casual games, and I have seen that the target audience are young people in their 20s, which is also the target audience for introductory chemistry course.
Okay, great. I was wondering, how did you set the boundaries? Because you can build up all the world just by putting all molecules together. So how did you decide, okay, I stopped there, and you mentioned that it was 20 main molecules. What made you decide that?
Sorry, there are 20 atoms,
20
and
atoms.
there are 200 compounds.
Okay.
What made me decide is first the time I had available, because of course we can build everything, but it was physically not possible. So I selected the atoms which I guess, because of course some atoms have redundant similar properties, so I selected some very characteristic per group, and I made components between them. So I made a table of X, Y, how everything interacts in a possible way. I selected only simple molecules with one type of bond present. The only molecules we have only one or two type of atoms. So it was selected mainly to simplify as much as possible while still keeping the whole theory necessary for the students.
So you use the game as a way for the student or the practitioner to understand basic mechanisms,
yes,
rather than building up molecules forever.
Yes. The mechanism was really to link everything in the connection.
Okay. Any other question in the audience? No? Then I may have a last question. How do you plan to test it? Would you have some sort of trial, or users that take your game, others that who do not, or just how do you see that?
Yes, it would be something like that, because, for example, there are standard tests which can be used to rank molecules according to their melting points and so on. And there will be a difference, two groups, one playing the game, another one not playing the game, and I assumed it would happen throughout one semester, and at the end of the semester both groups will be evaluated depending on how they're playing the game. It is intended to be used as a short playing sessions of 10 minutes or something like this, which can be played anywhere, not necessary during the course. So
excellent.
that is the idea.
So we hope for positive results. So thank you again. It's a really beautiful project.
Thank you.
Yes.